Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Murray, and I'm with you today to talk about how to use decodable texts, things educators need to know. Welcome to this space. This is the home of the Reading League, and this is in our resource area. I'm really happy to be with you and have you here with me. Okay, perfect. I have a PowerPoint over there, so I'm going to look down at my notes and over there and make this happen. I hope some of you are joining us because you're new to using decodable text and they're kind of a new thing for you. You've only used level text before. I think this will be just the right presentation for you. And to set the stage for what we're about to do, I think we can all agree that the goal of teaching reading is to build independent readers who can read accurately, automatically, and with full comprehension. And I have a picture of tools here because we can agree also that texts for teaching beginners how to read are just that. They are tools. And the focus of this presentation, decodable texts, those are just one tool to teach reading. It's not the only tool, but as you're going to see, if we want to build independent readers who can read accurately, automatically, and with comprehension, we have to make sure that decodable texts are one of the tools in our toolbox. In this presentation, I'll give you a brief, about 6 slides leading into the history and nature of decodable text. And then I have about 7 slides on what we call lesson to text match. And I'll do that because I want to draw your attention to the deliberate design of decodable texts and how those design elements are intentionally created for beginning readers. Then another handful of slides will give you the tips and examples of how to actually use decodable text when you're during your lessons, because again, they may be new to you. And finally, I want to dispel a lot of misconceptions about decodables and help you think about how to build and organize a decodable text library. Behind me are many decodable texts in our library from multiple publishers. I haven't counted them, and we even have more than this, so there's a lot to choose from out there. I hope you learn things that will be useful for you. Okay, this slide is my wordiest slide. Let's get through this one together, but I find some of this stuff very fascinating. This is the decodable text nerd in me coming out. In 1984, a researcher named Aukerman published a book, and in that book offered that there were 165 approaches to teaching reading. He noted that all of those approaches used one of 3 types of texts, each of which is designed with some kind of control. They can control phonic regularity. They can deliberately make them with the control at the whole word level, or they can control the elements of the whole book itself, the whole text. And that's what you can see in the first row of this table. The second row shows what each type is called today. For example, phonics texts were similar to those that we now call decodable today. As you can see in the row underneath the word decodable, rows underneath that, those decodable texts represent the latest in a long history of phonics texts that emphasized using the code to teach beginners to read. In the 90s, the term decodable text finally began to reference those having a really high proportion of phonetically regular words matched to what you had just taught in your phonics lessons. Whole word texts, the middle of this table, those emphasize repetition of whole words, memorization of high frequency words as a way to teach beginners how to read. the texts that retain a little trace of an emphasis on this whole word repetition today are those sold by trade book publishers. I think I have one here. Yes, I do. You might see these I Can Read books and so forth, where the same words are repeated over and over again. Those texts evolved from the belief, I'm going on to whole book text now. Whole book texts evolved from the belief that when students read repetitive, predictable sentences, see, we're getting past the word to the larger elements, repetitive words, repetitive phrases, they experience what was called whole book success. It was believed that this would motivate students to reread the text over and over, and when they do, they could then attend to the meaning and how words go together and hopefully letters and sounds. Those are what we now call leveled and, of course, predictable text, because they have a predictable text structure, especially the early versions or earlier ones in the sets. They emphasize themes, they emphasize ideas. They have a very close match between the text and the pictures on the pages. And how they came to be popularized as leveled is really interesting. Leveled, pretty much every set of books is leveled, even decodables. They start with, simple structures and move up to more complex ones. But the ones called leveled texts as we know them today were originally part of a one-on-one tutoring intervention called Reading Recovery. And in the US, that was implemented in the mid-1980s. And these texts that were used in that one-on-one tutoring at the time were just taken from collections. And I have one here. Sundance Publishing. Okay, so a strong picture to text match. So these were random collections that the teacher or tutor would pull from, and they were not even in a prescribed order. But as this became a more and more popular intervention and new books were developed and new sets were developed, of course, this led to a need for developing a whole market for this. And needing to assign them to levels was recognized. So a leveling system was developed by Barbara Peterson, who has an unpublished dissertation. I think I have it on the slide. No, I do not. Sorry. In 1988, Barbara Peterson. And it was adapted for general classroom use by Fountas and Pinnell. So that's the kind of a little bit of a history about that. So you kind of get the sense of the history of various kinds of text, but there really are just three kinds and types used today, and the two are predominant, decodable and leveled. So just a slide to talk about concerns about leveled text, particularly those that are highly predictable. A friend of mine once said, and I couldn't believe how smart it was for her to say it, Dr. Kristen Munger, she said, leveled texts make reading easy at a time when it's not supposed to be easy. Okay, and think about that. That's kind of true, isn't it? The bubbles on the slide show that the texts offer repeated sentence frames, so kids just can say, I see the, or grandma's house has a. So, and a lot of word repetition, and then very high picture match. So you just have to read that sentence frame, look up at the picture, and plug that in, and you've now quote unquote read the book. So whether that's reading or not, we can talk about in another presentation, but it seems to make it too easy when it shouldn't be. Kids are supposed to be having a little bit of expending some energy connecting letters and sounds and forming those neural connections between what you've just taught them, those squiggles on the page say something, and the sounds in our language. A practice of actually decoding does not take place in a leveled text format as much as it should. So that's not the right tool for that. So decodable text is the best tool for teaching beginning readers to decode. Of course, decodable text teaches you to decode. And it is the best tool for that automatic and accurate reading of words. It provides the intentional and frequent use and opportunity to take those patterns that a teacher just taught and put it into practice. So I have here a very, I love the graphic from Rise, Arkansas of Reading, and underneath I hope you can see the source and go use it on the internet. But decodable texts really zero in on helping to build those strands in the word recognition aspect of becoming a skilled reader. Leveled texts can be contributors to the language comprehension strands that are in the bluish and green colors on the top. But that's if the kids can read them. But so can authentic texts, read alouds of texts, and so forth. So I did not put leveled text on the top strand because there could be many kinds of texts and ways to learn all of the language comprehension elements needed at the top strands. So since this is a presentation about decodable text, let's now get there and stay in that lane. But again, looking at this, take away from this slide that decodable text is what you really need in your toolbox for teaching those bottom strands of word recognition. All right. So the deliberate design of these decodable texts behind me and all others is that they provide a proportion of words highlighting phonetically regular correspondences between letters and sounds. They also provide a match between those correspondences in the text and those that the reader has learned. So those two sentences, if they seem heavy to you, don't worry, I'm going to get more into it in a moment. We will provide more detail in a bit. A helpful hint here is that you're going to be much more successful teaching and using decodable text if you yourself have some familiarity with basic phonics principles, such as the 6-syllable types might be helpful to you, or knowing about the vowel teams, R controlled aspects, silent E aspects of words, those things that are what I mean. If it would be helpful to you, I have a free YouTube video on the Reading League's YouTube channel, and just look for the one having to do with syllable types. And you can run through that and get brought up to speed a little bit, if that would help. Okay. All right. So this slide, I hope after about 2 minutes on this slide, you walk away with a really important distinction. I remember learning this and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Whether a book is decodable or not actually is dependent on the reader, not on the book itself. So on this, the background here looks like it's 2 different books, but it's not. It comes, both of those stories, I did a screenshot from this book here. It's a selection that children they'd have a copy of this and the teacher would have them open up and they'd read a particular story. So the story on the left is used in the 16th lesson of this particular publisher's program. It comes early in this book, of course, and just looking at those words on the page, you can see what would be required for the student to decode it. They should have learned simple closed syllables and maybe the AY vowel team. I see the word play. And that is what's going to make this passage, that knowledge of the learner, of the reader, is what's going to make that passage decodable. On the right side, there's a story from the 43rd lesson in this particular program, in this book here. And I'm not going to delve into this program's particular scope and sequence, but just looking at the words again, I can see what kinds of knowledge, what kind of learning the reader must have had. They must have to have learned vowel teams, I see some R-controlled syllables like water and turtle and so forth. Vowel teams, I see shooting and the word means and so forth. So my takeaway message here, and it's a really important one as an educator, you have to look at all of your students who are readers at some level, and what's decodable for one will not be decodable for another. Their books are only decodable when what is in them has been taught. So the student who can decode the text on the left will not be able to decode the one on the right until you have taught them what they need to do it. The passage on the right is not decodable to that student until it's time. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. We're in the next section already, lesson to text match. And again, what makes a text decodable? So I hope this little action task works. Okay, I am going to have you hit pause on the next slide, but what I'll have for you is a text printed on that next slide, and I'll have an inventory of letters, sounds on the right. And then I'm going to want you to note the phonic, maybe grab some paper, note the phonic elements that your readers must have learned to make that text decodable for them. And I love this picture because this is from one of the Reading League's earliest events, and there's some teachers from the central New York area that came, and we actually did this. Everyone had the books and did all these action tasks. So we'll try to do it this way. So here we have, okay, you can pause here as soon as I'm done talking. A simple exercise, decodability determined by the reader, you get that now. But what consonant sounds and what vowel sounds will you need to have taught in order for a student to read this book accurately and independently? Okay, so you can hit pause, and I think, yep, this little book is a simple, small, easy to hold, easy to open, lay flat, decodable reader, a really early one. And so hit pause, and when you're done, I'll meet you on the next slide. All right, so let's compare the results. Some see a text like this, and I just want to face this right now, and they say, ugh, and this gives decodable text to them a bad rap all around. It sounds so fake. It sounds so stilted, right? Who talks like that, right? Now, mind you, all texts for beginning readers in their earliest levels don't have authentic language. Decodable text should not bear the bad rap for that. Leveled text too. Here's this one. I went to the park. I saw a kangaroo. I saw a koala. I saw a possum. I saw a snake. I saw an echidna. So that's not authentic language anyway. We don't talk like that either. So now, think about it. I think most of you have either done it yourself or have a child in your family who learning to play an instrument, even like a recorder. We all had to play Hot Cross Buns. And I'm not going to sing it for you, but it is a painful thing to listen to, right? Why is Hot Cross Buns always an early first song when kids start an instrument? Well, the child can play a song, and you only need to have taught them 3 notes. Hot cross buns. When they come back to their next lesson, they'll learn another note and another note and another note, and they'll learn where to place their fingers. They'll learn where the notes are on the paper and on their instrument. And then the songs get more sophisticated and sound more like authentic, real music. And they're going to be more successful. It'll be more fun. But the same premise exists in reading. And okay, this isn't like authentic language, but remember what we said, decodable text is a tool, and it teaches children to decode and blend letters and sounds together at the earliest stages. I have never, ever, I promise you, had a student really digging into reading this little text, right? And I have some video of kids doing it, and I never have them sit, look up at me and say, this is ridiculous. This doesn't sound like we talk. No one has ever said that to me. They keep their heads down. They're calling to mind what each of these squiggles represent, what sound it represents, and they're putting it together and they're moving to the next one, and they get to the end of the story, and hopefully we give them a nice high five or something and we read it again. And they get better at it, and they get more accurate and more automatic, more fluent, and then better again. They are literally hot cross bunning with letters and sounds. They're reading. Now, let's get to the work you did here. I hope the highlighted yellow letters are the ones you selected. I hope I did it right. Those are very common consonants and short sounds of vowel sounds. Would this be an appropriate text to use with students who know all the letters and sounds and digraphs and more sophisticated patterns? Absolutely not. You would never give this text to someone that knows a lot more about phonics patterns. This is appropriate for that hot cross-bun beginning reader. It's their little training wheels. And when you have students who have just learned a few sounds, why withhold them from the learning to apply it in practice and reading? Get them into books. Get them starting to blend. Tell them also, please, tell them what the book is for. Like your brain is amazing. You're starting to connect what's on the page to the sounds in our words that we talk about. And, you're becoming a real reader. And that's what this book is for, to give you that practice. So when you hear people criticize these texts, just, hum hot cross buns and walk away. No, better yet, explain what this is for. You're now learning what this is for, and please pass that on. Kids are not going to be stuck at this forever. This is just a week or two, and then they get to the next one and the next one, and you'll get them on the highway of decoding pretty soon. All right, so lesson to text match is the next thing. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize this, you don't have to actually do this, but you just have to be aware of the design of decodable text. So lesson to text match is just a percentage. It's the match between the content of the phonics instruction that you've taught, like maybe you've just taught a silent E pattern, and the words in the student text that you give them to read. So, not surprisingly at all, programs that emphasize meaning first have a very low lesson to text match percentage, and that makes sense. All right, code emphasis programs that have a scope and sequence of phonics from simple to more complex patterns have a very high percentage of lesson to text match in their programs. So they're in the green lower right corner. Under the fish, there's a little simple story. I've adapted this from Stein, Johnson, and Gutloan. It says, Bob the fish swims and swims. He swims past the rocks and the kelp, then he rests on the sand. All right, let's envision student A. They have only learned short O, ah, and they've only learned single consonants. They've not yet learned to blend like the SW together. They can't blend the L and P together in kelp or the ND together in sand. They do not know digraphs like in fish. So, how many words can student A read if they only know the short O sound and can read only single consonants? I'll give you a moment. You can pause, but I'm about to give you the answer. It's 2. Student A would only be able to read Bob and on. So if we have 20 total words here, if we're doing a percentage, 2 divided by 20 is 10%. This text's lesson to text match, if they've only learned that much, if I've only taught them those things, is only 10%. Now, time goes by. You're an amazing teacher. things are humming along, and not too long after her first try, student A reads this book again. By now, you've taught all the short vowels, the digraphs, how to blend those consonants together. How many words can she read now? Well, I count 14. And that brings that lesson to text match percentage up to 70%. Remember, decodability is an aspect of the reader, not that passage. It's phonetically regular words, definitely. But is it decodable? Depends on student A and what she knows. So it's 70%. And we have to assume you've also taught her along the way common high frequency words like the and he. And that actually would bring that, student A would then be able to accurately and automatically successfully read that independently, 100%, all the words. Okay, fantastic. I have one more action task for you. You'll be hitting pause again. It's a little bit more complex, but let me walk you through what's on this slide. All right, so take a look at the text in yellow. It's from a first grade intervention program, My Sidewalks, from a student anthology, similar to this thing, a set of stories. At the top in the blue boxes on the blue chart there are the phonic elements that have been taught by teachers up to this point of reading this story, Nell Can Help. So before giving them Nell Can Help, the teacher has taught all those consonants, the vowels, those short vowels, has not taught digraphs yet. All right? And now we're giving them Nell Can Help. So again, hit pause, and we'll calculate lesson to text match. All you have to do is count the number of words that students can read based on those phonics knowledge pieces that you've given. You can include the title, please, yes, because they have to read the title too. And once you have that number, divide it by the total number of words in the story, which is 73. You don't have to include those irregular or high frequency words that are in the blue table on the last row there, or last column. But you will see that the publisher did deliberately include those words too. But let's just focus on the lesson to text match, on the decoding of the words, the facet of phonics we're talking about. Okay, so hit pause. This one take you a little bit longer. Do your best to count, and I'll meet you on the next slide. Okay, welcome back. Maybe you got 54 or around there. I highlighted the words in red here that are the irregular words or high frequency words that we don't want to consider for this exercise. All right, I hope I did it right. Please don't email me if you got 53 or something, it's okay. If we were to have included the words that can be decoded based on previous lessons and those irregular / high frequency words, lesson to text match bumps up to 93%. We can see clearly here that publishers try to make their books such that kids can read them successfully and such that it supports kids and gives them a chance to put into practice what you've been teaching them. There is no scientific science of reading percentage that's the magic number to aim for. Some suggest 70 to 80% is a nice range to aim for so students can, have some success and not be frustrated, and also get enough repetitive practice in applying those patterns. So no I'm not expecting you, no one should ever expect you to figure out the lesson to text match in your books. Please don't think you have to go into your classroom and pull all the books off the shelf all summer long and calculate lesson to text match. Please don't do that. It's not a good use of your time. But just remember a few things, okay? Remember that the decodable text, or how decodable it is, depends on your students, what you've taught them. You've got that now. Remember to take into consideration that what they know is important when you're choosing books from your library. You're not going to just come in here and choose based on the cover because a cover can be pretty deceptive. It might say the word lucky on it, and you think it's a book about with CK in it, and there might not be another CK anywhere in there. So you have to take into consideration when opening the book and looking at the scope and sequence and so forth. We'll talk about that at the end. Keep in mind that in leveled predictable text, a sample that I can't include one here for obvious reasons, there's really very, very low lesson to text match. They use a leveled text gradient that might be numerical or alphabetic, A to Z or whatever. And those gradients are not constructed to focus on the code. That's not their intent. That's not the tool they are developing. Those texts are extend from a philosophy or a theory or belief that the best way to teach reading is through visual memorization. And focus on meaning first as an entry into reading. So even though in their lessons of a program that uses solely leveled or predictable text, they may have a short word work aspect for you to work on with your children, you can be pretty sure that that element is not going to appear in the text. It's completely disjointed. They are not written to complement each other at all. In fact, the words in early predictable text might even be multisyllabic words with a clear-cut picture match. So a child in a level A book or a level B book will have that sentence frame and then the word strawberries, garden, tomatoes, pumpkin, bunnies. Now those words are not going to be decodable for the student. There is no lesson to text match, and those books cannot be used for helping students to become accurate, independent decoders. All right, one slide here before we get into using decodable text on structured literacy. Structured literacy, if you want to learn more about it, please go to the International dyslexiaida.org's website. They have a beautiful graphic that I pulled this from. So a couple facets of structured literacy are that structured literacy is systematic. It means that the organization of the material that you are doing to teach reading follows the logical order of the language. It does begin at the easiest, maybe just short vowels, and then start to add, single consonants and start to go into digraphs and blends and more vowel patterns. So the most basic concepts and elements progress to the more difficult ones. So that's the system involved in a program that's structured. A structured literacy program is also cumulative, meaning each step or each new thing that you learn is based on concepts previously learned and builds upon. It makes sense, just like we do with music and math and everything else we learn. Explicit. Structured literacy is explicit. We never assume that students are going to naturally pick it up. We explicitly show them, oh, see the two O's together? When we see that, we can say, ooh, in this book or in this sentence. And so we tell them, we don't have them figure it out by saying, this word here, I know you know how to read zoo, so you should be able to read this one. That wastes time and confuses so many of our children. So please consider, when go back and read through this slide, systematic and cumulative and explicit. The text you use when you're teaching with structured literacy has to be decodable, right? So it would be very hard to teach with structured literacy and teach with a systematic, explicit, cumulative phonics component of your instruction without decodable text. All right, so how do we use them? Let's go here now. All right. You have to be positive. You have to, with any kind of text, right? I always celebrate, especially for kids where it's a little bit of a struggle or a big struggle when they, when they are applying that new digraph you just taught them or the silent E and they get it correct. Just, this is a moment of celebration. It's exciting that they're noticing it and applying it in their reading. Again, just like we saw on the structured literacy slide, be explicit too. If they come to a word that they get stuck on, you're no longer going to say, look at the picture. You're not going to say, start again, get your mouth ready. All of those numerous things that you expect kids to stop and remember to do, which they tend to never do on their own. Just be explicit and say, okay, this sound right here, let's look at this one together. What does this say? And if they get stuck on what it is, give them a nudge. Maybe you could say, E, echo, yes. So that's let's start that word again. And then have them reblend it. If they get stuck on that word, you can have them say each sound out loud, blend with them in a kind of a we-do structure. And always good to pre-read words if necessary with a particular student or group of students and highlight the pattern. Okay, so all right, we just learned EE. Says what? Yes, okay, so in this book, here we go. Let's find the words that have EE in it. And if it's a paper that they can highlight, great, give them some highlighters and pay attention to it. And celebrate it when they get it correct. So they can kind of be like code detectives and say, I see one, and they know that tool is giving them the practice they need. Reread a sentence or a section until it's completely smooth. This gives that additional practice and builds that fluency in. Fluency is effortless reading, so we want to get that in there. All right, things to avoid, please, when you're using decodables. This one's hard to break. Good luck. Try anything you can to get kids to not look up at you. That's a habit they have, especially if they've been learning to read using texts where they can just guess and get support, those crutches we talked about. If books have been making reading easy at a time when it shouldn't be, and now they can't find the information, they look up at you all the time. So we want to encourage them and say, I'm confident that you can read this book because we've learned it all. Let's look down at the word. That's where the information is. Also, please, I do this all the time. It's hard to break a hard habit. And when I used to teach grad students during the practicum, and it'd be like, oops, you did it again. You just want to help the kids and give them the word when they miss it, when they struggle. Please, when they come to a word, let them work through it. Let them work through it. Ask them what they need help. Again, point out the sound that they are struggling in. Help them remember it if you need to. Coach them. Be their coach. Like a swimming coach. How to hold your arms or how to turn your head or how to kick. Give them the how-to in that process, and they're going to get it stronger and stronger every day. And please do not allow first letter guessing. So again, if they've been raised on a diet of get your mouth ready, what's the first letter, look at the picture, they're going to just look at that first letter. The whole word has the information they need. The middle letter is important, the middle letters. The final letter, they got to work their way through that word and blend through it. Okay, so no looking up. Don't give them the word and stop that first letter guessing. Hopefully we can get students that haven't had those bad habits coming to us, but it's something that's hard to break. Now, what about those pictures on the pages? Please also never tell students to look at the picture to read a word. Okay? Many publishers of decodable texts deliberately make it so that the pictures on their pages do not help students rely on those for the word identification. They make it so that, and I'll show you on the next slide some examples of what I'm talking about, they make it so that the pictures on the pages just confirm what they just read. So only use the pictures once the page has been read, or the section of the page has been read, to go back and confirm accuracy or develop or monitor comprehension, talk about it, etc. I want to show you some examples of that. Yeah, we're going to just throw eagle eye in the garbage, please. All right, so here's some examples of decodable texts, and you can see if you can read the words on the pages there, that those words cannot be figured out by looking at the pictures. Okay, so let me give an example here. The bottom right one, the gull is fast. You would not be able to discern that the word is fast from that picture. The gull tugs. Again, you can't discern that from that picture. Stink bug wings have net-like tips. You can't figure that out from the picture at all. But once you read that, you can look at the picture and say, oh yeah, I see that they kind of look like a net. And then Ted there on the upper left, he's thinking and planning, he's fast with math. You're not going to be able to get stuck on a word and look over at that picture and figure out what it is. But once you have read that Ted is fast with math, you can look at the picture and kind of comprehend what Ted's about and maybe what he does with his job or whatever. Okay, so not all decodables have this feature. Don't expect to see it all the time. But when you do see it, note how it really does do a good job deterring students from looking at the picture. They've immediately realized they can't kind of cheat read, as I call it. Okay? It's a nice comprehension check, though. All right, so using decodable texts for independent reading, you want to do that until, people ask me all the time, how long until we can get into blah, blah text? They want to move on. Well, you want to make sure that students can accurately, and I bolded that word, you want to make sure they can accurately read all these things in this yellow table. These are some guidelines for the often asked questions. How long should I use decodable text? So they should be able to accurately read single syllables, both real and nonsense. And we don't care that kids can read nonsense syllables, but when you think about it, when you grow up into a reader reading multisyllabic words, most of the syllables in multisyllabic words are nonsense syllables. Okay, so like the word sibling, both of those syllables aren't real words, they're nonsense syllables, but so you have to be able to decode anything. And you want those syllables to be read out of context accurately with all syllable patterns. They should include syllables and with digraphs and blends as well. So we want them to be able to accurately read pin and pinch, leet and pleat, put the PL in there. So you have to be able to read leet in order to read delete, right? And you have to read pleat in order to read complete, moot and smooth, cur and curd. So words get more complex. You need to be able to read real, common, two-syllable words using all those syllable patterns, including the schwa. So there's pleat, complete, but we usually say complete, so that O has a little bit of a lazy-sounding schwa sound. So before transitioning to fully uncontrolled texts, students should be able to read these kind of things with a high level of automaticity. And so accurate is important, right? Not getting any sounds wrong, or else you didn't read the word right. But automaticity is important too. We don't want kids reading the words on the page slowly, sounding out sound by sound by sound. That means we need to be staying there longer. We can't be impatient. So decodable texts align with standards. We have a high focus, and we should. These are the Common Core state standards, or whatever state standards you adhere to are important and to follow. That's our job. But I want to point out that in order, let me just say that here's a sampling of some Common Core state standards, and I pulled them from the phonics and word study aspects at various grade levels. And I want to just point out to you and illustrate how decodable texts are a pretty important instructional tool if we're going to succeed at teaching the standards. So 1.3, Reading Foundations. Students should be able to decode regularly spelled one-syllable words. Decodable texts are going to help you with that. 1.3, decode, lower left corner, decode two-syllable words following basic patterns by breaking the words into syllables. Decodable text will help you with that tool. It'll give kids the practice so they can do it. How about going up to 2.3? Decode regularly spelled two-syllable words with long vowels. 3.3, decode multisyllable words. 4.3, use combined knowledge of all letter-sound correspondences, syllabication patterns, and morphology to read accurately unfamiliar multisyllabic words, and this part is important, in context and out of context. Why do they say out of context as a standard? In context, when you're reading, the meaning can kind of feed you what that word is. Taking it out of context ensures that they're actually reading the word, not using the context to support them. So both are important. And then 5.3, again, all letter-sound correspondences, syllabication patterns, morphology to read accurately in context and out of context. So that's where we have to get students from grades 1 to 5, and considering that we have to do that, can you imagine trying to accomplish these standards without having any decodable text on hand? That's a problem. So hopefully we can get some decodable text in use in our schools, and they'll might have more luck getting these standards reached. Okay, so I hope this works. I don't know if it will, and if it's not, I apologize. That's okay. But both of the, I have two images here. One is a video that I hope works, that shows things that we've done with beginner students, beginner readers who are resistant to reading books due to having had difficulty learning to read just basic letters and learning sounds and phonological awareness and such. Both of the boys here were very averse to getting anywhere near an actual book. I can't read books. I can't read books. The left is a sample of a homemade sentence sheet that I made. We probably took some of these sentences from decodable text or made them up on our own. Doesn't matter. I can't use an actual book with this boy, or I couldn't because he would shut down. So covered the sentences with a paper flap for a couple of reasons. One is if I showed him just the piece of paper with all those sentences, 3 sentences would have made him, it would have intimidated him. And 2, it makes it more like a game. You know, let's do like a lift the flap. I have to tell you, the boy that I did this with was in 9th grade. And being able to do this sentence reading propelled him into a one of the most amazing cases of, my God, I actually can do this. I'm finally learning it. And he became starving for more. He did not know any letter sounds at all when we first started working with him. So this was a big jump. The one on the right is the video that I hope plays. And a kindergartner had just learned to blend a handful of sounds. This was a boy who, when he first came to us in this program, would keep his coat on, keep his backpack on, and push himself into a corner of the room with, face first and not budge. But the video shows that he had learned to blend a handful of letter sounds. He was at this kind of a hot cross buns a little bit, and he had a lollipop that he was using as a pointer. He had just worked hard, and we went out into like a vestibule in the school, and he wanted to show off how well he not only was reading, but that he also illustrated. So we gave him the sentences and left the box blank for him to then draw what he just read, kind of like a reverse comprehension thing. And you'll see, I hope if this video works, you'll see that someone tossed him a wrap candy as well, and it was the 9th grader that I just talked about. He was with these little kids, but realizing that they were working hard too. So, and also after this little boy in kindergarten read these sentences again, I presented it to him not in sheets, but in a book form. And, you know, I stapled it and drew on a cover with his face on it. And I showed him, like, now you've read a book. So we crossed that bridge. So these are, I'm going to hope it works. Okay.
A nap on a log. Bob the cat has a pet rat. The fat red hen says sat on a pig.
What do you say?
Thank you. Two. What did this say? Two.
Close. The T sound is right. And then go with the next sound.
N.
Ted. And then the last sound. Ted.
Ted.
Yes.
The dog has a big red pen. I drew the point on
So
it.
perfect.
All right, another way to use decodable text, especially for kids who it's hard work for and it's strenuous, and we have an issue with stamina because they're doing so much hard work putting it all together, is this little suggestion on this page or on this slide. So when some students who've had that really hard time with decoding and blending, it can almost be physically tiring to read an entire text. So some clever ideas for you here, and knowing teachers and how they bring art to all that they do. Please, I hope if it sparks even a better idea, let me know about it. So one idea is to cover the words with a Post-it note. And then on the back of the note would be lightly penciled point. So I think you can see that it says +2 or +3 on the back of these Post-it notes. And you have to lightly pencil it because kids can see through the paper if you go too hard or use a pen. On the left, a kindergarten student's teacher put a Post-it note on each page to cover the picture because, as you can imagine, that's awful. So another thing to build stamina or motivation is, and you have to, this is up to your discretion, noise of the day. If students are reading and come to a word with a pattern that you just learned that in your phonics lesson that day, they can make the noise of the day. So they can quietly snap fingers, they can tap on the desk. So if they learned EE and they come to the word keep, like that. And it's kind of fun for everyone to kind of be doing their independent reading at their tables while you're still doing small groups and you keep hearing the noise from those word detectives around the room. And of course, back again to partner reading for repeated practice, buddy reading, elbow reading, whisper reading, whisper tubes, all of that can build all that creative and stamina building aspect as kids really get into decodable text, especially if they have some trouble with it. Okay. Where are we going now? Let's see. There we go. Misconceptions. We're here. Okay, let's talk about these. Aren't decodable texts boring? Well, no, but maybe they are for you. If I have to hear them read about Al, the alligator again, and it's hot out, and he has to stop, and all this stuff, it's really boring for me. The book, it's not boring for me to see kids reading and learning to read, though. But not for kids. Again, they don't look up and say, this book's boring. They just don't. They're experiencing validation. They are fine, especially those kids who are finally getting this kind of instruction. It's like the weight of the world has fallen off of them, that they're like, oh, before I knew in my heart that I wasn't really reading, that I was faking it and guessing and so forth. And that guessing is humiliating inside, so it's good. They understand and accept that the purpose of the text, if it is explained to them, you don't have to make a big deal out of it. Just say, okay, here's the book we are using today to practice that silent E pattern. Let's be on the lookout for it. I grabbed an old Twitter tweet, and let's take a look inside some of these gorgeous decodables where kids can feel proud they're actually reading without giving the illusion of reading. Okay, so aren't decodable texts boring? No, they are not boring to the children. Trust me, they might be for you. You know, if it's not something you want to curl up with at night reading some of these books. But what's really happening for the students is a couple of things. They're experiencing validation. They know they are actually reading, when before they probably had been guessing. And guessing, if that's what they had to do before they came to you, it's really humiliating. And they have to hide the fact, and they know in their hearts that they weren't reading it. They understand and accept the purpose of the text fine. You don't make a big deal out of it. You pass out the book and you're like, okay, here's the story we're gonna read today to practice silent E. Let's be on the lookout for it. Want to go through it first and see how many you can see? All right, we've got 7 of them we're going to be looking for today. And then we also have in there the AY we did last week. So lots of things to keep an eye out for and so forth. So you tell them that's the tool, and on they go. And I also included a tweet from a long bit ago, a couple of years ago. We had a wonderful live event that's also on our YouTube. Alicia Sparks did a live event for the Reading League that's free. You can get it on Decodable Text. And we tweeted for that event and said, let's take a look inside some of these gorgeous decodables that kids can feel proud and they're actually reading versus giving the illusion of reading. And oh my goodness, if you could just see and be here with me. I wish we were live. I could put them up on a document camera or something, but just absolutely gorgeous. Dig and pat. Nana, put a dash of this and a dab of that. There you go. So not only beautiful, but not boring in that sense, but they're just gorgeous inside. So many now. All right. Any kind of text for beginning readers can be boring to you or not authentic. But I mean, like if you think that decodable texts have a boring sound, again, remember that Hot Cross Buns piece about it. That they, for beginning readers, they need that simplistic beginning, and it can't sound like authentic language, which they can get from when you do read alouds and so forth. But I mean, I made this up. This could be very well a leveled text. I see a kitchen in my house. I see a bedroom in my house. I see a bathroom in my house. I see a basement in my house. Now, I have never, interestingly, heard teachers say, leveled texts are boring, but that's not really very scintillating either. Okay, so that's a point you can make when to dispel a misconception. So more on the contrived and lacking authentic language piece. Remember, decodable texts are a tool designed intentionally to help provide repeated practice on what you have been taught. And they have come so far, too. They're just gorgeous, like I just showed you, full of colorful illustrations. Cultural relevance is starting to make its way into these books, informational text as well. And here's a couple more tweets from that live event we had. Think again if you think they're unattractive, boring, and authentic. Okay. They can practice phonics skills they've learned in connected decodable texts. It's a myth that they cannot be engaging. And here I have just a full screen. Oh, there's the one I just showed you, the yellow one, the pot of beans. So there are some gorgeous texts from multiple publishers here to give you the sense of what's available in the marketplace these days. So they've come a long way. Wish we had time for a whole show and tell on them. Okay, another myth or misconception, if you will, is that they impair fluency. Kids don't become fluent readers, and that they slow reading acquisition. This is not the case. Remember, we don't expect readers to sound fluent when reading decodable text because they are deliberately focusing on that new skill of applying and blending their sound correspondences. It's a new task for them. Think about when you did a beginning, started to do long division. It took you a while, right? Because you had to remember and apply your multiplication and division of individual numbers and so forth. So it should be, again, difficult for them. It's to some degree. But you're there as a coach and you get them through it and make sure they're successful and don't practice mistakes. They're practicing a new skill. And any new skill one learns is not immediately fluent. But they're adding skills to their repertoire. More and more and more every day. More automaticity, more knowledge, more accuracy. And that builds ultimately to fluency. And so I remind you of that thing my friend Kristen Munger said, level texts make reading easy at a time when it's not supposed to be easy. So if you think kids sound better reading what I had on this previous slide, I went the wrong way. If you think that's fluency, I see a kitchen in my house, I see a bedroom in my house. Keep in mind, they're not actually reading when they do that. Those crutches that those books provide are pushing them along and giving a perception of fluency. Sounding fluent when you're reciting a memorized sentence stem, does not mean there's a fluent reader there. Putting an unpracticed new text in front of them will not reveal that same fluent sounding reading. And put that to bed. So, acquiring decodable texts. There we go. Alrighty, so this is one of our most popular, frequently requested resources we have on our website. If you go to thereadingleague.org and click on the Knowledge Base tab, you'll then scroll down and click on Frequently Requested Resources, and you'll see our decodable text sources document, and we update that periodically as we learn about new publishers' products. Now, please do not think, and we even put it in print, this is not books we recommend. This is just options for you to go as a consumer, an educator who wants to know what's out there. We just put them all in one place. We're not saying, we're completely agnostic on these. It's up to you to choose what you need. So please don't call this the Reading League's recommended book list. People say that and we go, no, it's not really. But this is a never complete, it's a living document. We're always adding to it. We include hyperlinks to make it easier work for you to click through to the publisher's websites. It's a constantly evolving list for a one-stop shopping source for educators. All right, so many of those are behind me, and others are on other shelves here in our resource room. So if you're ever in central New York and you want to stop by here, you are more than welcome to come look at these in person. So building a decodable text library takes time. Schools everywhere have full rooms that are called the leveled text room, and with bins and bins and bins and piles and bags and hooks and all that. And it took years for the school to get that, all right? So don't worry. It takes a long time to build a library. You want to ultimately organize decodable text by the phonic elements. Behind me, I have them by publisher, and they wouldn't normally look like that, okay? Things you can consider when you're shopping and building over time a library. You want to make sure, please, to include titles or programs with some books that have some culturally relevant aspects to them. Look for a mix of fiction and nonfiction. Take a peek at the publisher's scope and sequence. Your core reading program might have a scope and sequence that you want to align to. They never will. Don't even get your hopes up. All of these programs have similar scopes and sequence, but not the same. So it's up to how you organize them. So when you're teaching blends, you might have a multiple publishers' books on a shelf or organized by the blends and so forth, so you can grab them quickly to complement your core reading program. You want to look for grade level. Maybe you need some, you got to build up your offerings that have multisyllabic words for students that are older or advancing quickly. And then how do the publishers deal with irregular words? Do they list them somewhere? Do they highlight them? Anything unique about those? Those are some things to just pay attention to as you build your library, and those are some things you can prioritize looking for. So the rest of these slides are really pictures from schools that we've worked with in how they organize them. So that I like the little picture in the middle here, shows how they do sign outs and so forth. So the labels on the bins might be helpful for you to see. All right, and so this school, this was their first beginning entry point into decodables. They had none before. So they bought a couple publishers' versions and were beginning it. So once you get a few text sets, start breaking them up and sort them by the phonic pattern. And maybe you can rubber band them in groups of 6 or something like that, or however many you would want for a small group of readers. And here's another way of doing it. So the teachers' names are on the clothespins, and if you took some out, you put your clothespin on there. And you can return them easily, or someone that needs that. Usually what happens is everyone's on the same pattern at the same time and things start to run a little bit low. So you can go find where those books went. And you can see those are rubber banded into smaller sets for the kids to use. Over on the right of this slide are some labels that you can use for labeling the bins. That's just some suggestions. This library is starting to get bigger in that school. And then what do you do with level texts that you used to, what do we do with all these beautiful books? Well, here's an example of one of our schools we work with. And it wasn't soon into our professional development relationship that they asked this question. And they took all of their beautiful leveled texts and resorted them by topic, aligning with their core reading programs, topics that they were covering in their knowledge strands. So that's kind of cool that they did that. That was just like 1 week into doing it. It's grown since then, a couple of years ago. And I'm glad I remembered I put this slide in here. This is the picture on the left is the presentation by Alicia Sparks that I alluded to a few minutes ago that is on the Reading League's YouTube channel. Please subscribe to that. And this is the Deciphering Decodable Text presentation, and she gets very into a multiple text approach where you use the different tools for different purposes. So when to use decodable text, grade level text, read alouds, etc., and their purposes. A must-see presentation. It's one of our most popular ones. So I hope this presentation has given you new insights into decodable texts, how to use them, some practical level insights. And I would have loved to have included more on decodable text, but again, Alicia Sparks, and we also have another decodable text pattern or lesson to text match video on YouTube. So I'll close with a simple analogy that our coach director, Kelly Johnson, likes to use when she's trying to explain the decodable text aspect of reading instruction. It's like a basketball drill that gets you to playing an actual game successfully. If you can't dribble and if you can't pass or shoot those little fundamental important pieces of a game, you will never become successful at fluently integrating all of those skills and the test and urgency and time-limited action of a real game. It's a hyper-focus on over-learning almost each component of a game to the point where it seems and looks fluent and effortless that allows the player to deal with all the other components that come into play. Dealing with defense while driving up to the hoop, anticipating the moves of other players. So decodable text provides that repeated application and practice that turns the reader into an accurate and automatic, fluent, effortless reader that has the cognitive desk space now for comprehension and learning about their world. And as we indicated back at the very first slide or two on this presentation, isn't that the goal we all share? So that is it. I really think you've got this. I thank you for joining me today. I thank you so much for being part of the Reading League. If you aren't a member, please go to our website and join us. And if you're into learning about the science of reading, welcome. Make sure to subscribe to our journal if you're ready for that. And we also encourage everyone to go join the Science of Reading movement at whatisthescienceofreading.org and put your name in the pot of saying, yes, I'm into this. I'm joining up. I'm one of many who wants to make a difference in education of reading. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear any feedback at maria@thereadingleague.org. Thank you very much.